Welcome to this edition of the Times Techies webinar series. My name is Sujit John, and I have with me my colleague Shilpa Fadnis. We are technology and business reporters at TOI, and both of us have been with TOI a long time. The two of us will moderate this discussion. Our discussion today is about a study that AWS and AlphaBeta, an economic strategy firm based in Singapore and Australia, did. The study sought to understand the future digital skill needs in 6 countries in the Asia Pacific, including India. The idea was to develop insights on the number and types of digital skills that different groups of workers will need to gain by 2025 in order to keep pace with technological change. We thought this is exactly the kind of insights that Times Techies audiences like to hear about. To discuss this, we have with us Rahul Sharma. Rahul is the president of public sector at Amazon Internet Services in AWS India and South Asia. Rahul leads the public sector team to help government agencies, public sector undertakings, education institutions, healthcare, and non-profit organizations adopt AWS cloud services. Rahul is an elected member of the NASSCOM Executive Council and also a member of the ITES Sector Skills Council. Welcome, Rahul.
And we have with us Fraser Thompson. Fraser is director and co-founder of AlphaBeta. Like we said earlier, AlphaBeta is an economic strategy firm based in Singapore and Australia. It aims to integrate economics and strategy to support business and government decision-making. Fraser previously worked at McKinsey, and he also led the McKinsey Global Institute, the economic research arm of McKinsey in Southeast Asia, and was also a consultant with McKinsey for 6 years, having worked across the US, Europe, the Middle East, Africa, and Asia. Prior to McKinsey, Fraser worked at the World Bank, focused on East Asia and Northern Africa. Welcome, Fraser. Those who are viewing this can send in questions through the Facebook comment box. Sujit and I will put them to Rahul and Fraser. Both will make short presentations first, after which we will get into the Q&A. Without much ado, over to you, Rahul.
Thank you so much, Shilpa, and thank you so much, Sujit. It's an honor and pleasure to be here. We thought we'd just start with an overview of what the study was about and the key high-level findings, and then hand over to Dr. Fraser to talk more in depth about the findings, and specifically the findings from an India perspective, and then we'll bring it home with a recap of what AWS is doing within skilling in India, and the key customers that we're working with. So as Sujit said, the study is all about unlocking APAC's digital potential and with the changing digital needs and policy approaches that need to happen to be able to keep current to the times. This is a report that was commissioned by AWS and prepared by AlphaBeta. One of the key things that we are aware of is the changing need for digital skills on an ongoing basis, and at the pace of which this is changing as well. So this report strives to analyze the digital skills applied to workers in their jobs today. So it's all about digital skill, about digital workers. It also tries to project the digital skills required by the workforce over the next 5 years. And this specifically included 6 countries: Australia, India, Indonesia, Japan, Singapore, and South Korea. I think one of the key things that the report strives to get to is a far more granular view of skills. There's a lot of reports that have been published around skilling, especially around digital skills, but this report specifically addresses the need at a far more granular level, and that's what I like, and both from a depth point of view as well as a breadth point of view. Next slide, please. So why did we commission this report? I think the key is that the need to have a holistic view on digital and technology, and we know that the gap has been increasing over the course of time, both for existing workers and for future workers. So how do we bring existing workers to more skills, but also how do we keep adding more and more workers to the future? I think India specifically, is going through a big transformation, and the divide is larger as well. So therefore, the need to have a more prescriptive model around granular availability and progression of skills is important. We're also going to highlight some best practices and sharing and learning that can happen across these 6-7 countries that we're working with, and which will be especially useful for policymakers over the next 5 years in terms of interventions. Next slide, please. So why is this research relevant? I think some of the data points that you already know, everybody's talking about it during these times. 60% of APAC's GDP could be derived from digital products and services. In India, 7% of the GDP in 2017-18 was dependent on digital, and it's going to grow significantly going forward. So digital technologies are and continue to be important in uplifting not just from a tech perspective, but other industries as well across. But as we've seen, COVID-19 and the pandemic sort of changed the direction and the momentum and velocity of digital transformation. I think that's where equipping the population and equipping our workers with more and more digital skill and finally granular view of those skills becomes important. Overall, I think there is a limited understanding of the future digital skills at a granular level, and that's what this report is really trying to address. Next slide, please. So, 3 key questions that this report is trying to answer. To what extent do workers in these countries apply digital skills today? 2, what are the potential digital skills that are needed that could arise by 2025 within these countries? And 3, what are the potential policy approaches that are needed to address these skills? Next slide, please. I just wanted to talk a little bit about, I talked about the fact that the report is striving to be more granular, also with better depth and better breadth. So the digital worker, the definition of the digital worker in the report is fairly important. And what the report strives to do is give a more generic definition of a digital worker from a very basic. So you can think about a plumber, you can think about an electrician, right up to a data scientist. You can also, so all of these are digital workers because they will and continue to use digital in a significant form going forward. So the definition of the digital worker in context of this report is important. I wanted to set that up. Let me give you a brief preview into what's coming up ahead. So from an India point of view, these are the top 5 digital skills that the report found would be highest in demand. And it's a no-brainer that cloud architecture design is ranked the first, and in terms of the growth over the next 5 years, 34%. The software operations support, web software, and game development are, they're also no-brainers. This is not something that will be a surprise to anybody. But I think the number, the amount of growth that we're talking about, I think is the interesting part. Also, large-scale data modeling, and data is going to be an important element of how digital will be used. You can clearly see the kind of growth that is expected. And obviously, cybersecurity and cyber forensics is a hugely growing area. And these are the opportunities that exist in front of us, especially from an India point of view. So just a recap of the report of the top 5 digital skills in terms of highest growth. Next slide, please. One of the key data points that I also wanted to strive towards is, this, which is 76% of digital workers who are not applying cloud computing skills today believe that this will be an important skill going forward into the future. And I think that's the key that I want to leave with everybody here. Many times when we look at cloud skills, you think about, you got so many new technologies, you got machine learning, AI, you got IoT, you got AR, VR, and you got cloud. I think I just want to reset that context a little bit for you as you think about cloud, because cloud is pervasive going forward. It's going to be across everything. How you do machine learning on cloud, how you do IoT on cloud. I'll just give you a very quick example. The way you configure networking on the cloud is completely different from the way you would normally do a physical networking setup, in terms of setting up virtual private networks, just as an example. And that's a very different skill. So going forward, I think one of the key things that I would like to emphasize on is not just the fact that applying these skills are going to be hugely important. These are also going to be far more pervasive and literally become the base elements of the skill. So on that, let me hand over to Dr. Fraser to talk in more depth about the research methodology and the findings.
Terrific. Thank you, Rahul. And thanks everyone for joining today for this session. So as Rahul mentioned, there's been a lot of past work that looks at digital skills, but our work has tried to add to that by extra granularity and understanding what types of digital skills are really going to be important. So we look at 28 different types of digital skills in this report. But secondly, granularity on what type of workers need those skills. So are these workers future workers? Are they the students of today that will be entering the workforce? Are they the people that already have digital skills in India but will need to enhance their skills? Are they people in the workforce that don't have those skills today but need to build them? Or are they people outside the workforce or unemployed that need to build that? And so we think that granularity in terms of the workers and the skills is really important to shifting this discussion to a much more practical level, given the challenge we face. So starting point is, what do we mean by digital skills? So digital skills are the specific abilities, knowledge, and know-how for how people can apply digital technologies to their professional or personal lives. And we can think of digital skills in 2 broad buckets. The first is the basic digital skills. So think about these as basically the ability to use digital software and hardware typically aimed at a kind of mass consumer market. So very basic things such as communicating and collaborating using basic digital mediums, for example. Then the second group is these advanced digital skills. And this is really about customizing and developing new digital tools, software, and applications. One of the big ones that we'll talk about in a moment is cloud. That shift to the cloud is going to be a really important part of the India growth story over the next 5 to 10 years. If we go to the next slide, talking about skills, we can think about them in two ways. There's competency areas, and then there's proficiency levels. So competency areas basically refer to the different categories of skills, and the proficiency basically refers to how advanced you are in each of those categories. So we zoom into that on the next slide. We see that in terms of competency areas, there's 8 that we look at. And you can think about these as vertical competencies and horizontal competencies. And I think this will be important for people joining this webinar to basically understand that distinction, because the vertical ones are things on specific content areas. So for example, cloud computing competencies. And these tend to change very quickly as the technology evolves. But then there's horizontal competencies. And these are sort of more technology agnostic, but cover general skills that are going to be needed. So things like project management, digital problem solving. And these tend to be more sticky over time. And to really set yourself up for success in this new digital world that we're entering, it's going to be that competence, that combination of vertical competencies and horizontal competencies that are going to be really important. Having one without the other is not going to be the recipe for success. If we go to the next slide, please. Then there's the what level of advancement and sophistication do you need in each of those different types of competencies? And these range from at the foundational user, so very basic level, to the innovator, who's someone sort of going beyond the sort of cutting edge to really think about how they use these digital skills in ways that they haven't been used before. And if we go to the next slide, please. That was kind of a bit on the definitions. Now I want to talk about how are these digital skills being used in APAC and India today. So on to the next slide. We looked at 6 countries in this research. So we looked at India, Japan, Indonesia, South Korea, Australia, and Singapore. And what's interesting, if you look around today, that out of these 6 countries, there's almost 150 million workers that are applying digital skills in their jobs today. And you can see there, India on the left-hand side has the most. But perhaps not surprising given the size of the Indian population. What's interesting is that if you look at that blue bubble below, and that's the share of the workforce that are applying digital skills today. So India actually has the lowest percentage versus these other countries at 12%. But I would actually see that in a very positive light. It shows you the huge potential that India has to really accelerate that digital skills and the growth and the prosperity that could unleash. So a big sort of mission statement, if you like, or question we try to solve for is how do we get that level of upskilling that we need? If we go to the next slide, we then delve into that. And so, what's the split between basic and advanced digital skills? And if we look across APAC, roughly 6 in 10 workers today are using more advanced digital skills. So quite a significant percentage. Now, the next slide then breaks that down country by country, just looking at the advanced skills. And I think here's a really interesting story for India. So India may lag overall in terms of the share of the workforce using digital skills, but those that are using them tend to have the highest share of those using advanced digital skills. And maybe that's not surprising because a lot of those digital skills are probably being used in key sectors such as ICT today in India. And obviously, as we know, India's got a fantastic ICT sector. So really the challenge for India is how do we go beyond the ICT sector and really touch some of those more traditional sectors where the penetration of digital skills is far lower today, but it has much higher potential for growth in the future. If we go into the next slide and zoom in, just looking at that advanced digital skills component. So as I said, 7 in 10 workers in India today are applying advanced digital skills. Now, if we look at non-tech sectors such as manufacturing, 40% of them are applying advanced digital skills, so lower than the overall share. So there is that sort of drop off, if you like. As soon as we move outside that kind of ICT sector in particular to the more traditional sectors, we're seeing not only a drop-off in the penetration of workers using digital skills, but also the sophistication or advanced level of those digital skills that they're using. So there's that kind of, if you like, that twin challenge. How do we ensure that workers in those sectors are using digital skills, and how do we also upskill them to the more advanced level of digital skills? If we go to the next slide, I want to zoom in on cloud computing. And Rahul showed the slide previously that cloud computing is going to be the single fastest growing digital skill demanded in India over the next 5 years. So what does that look like? And if we unpack that, we see that the biggest demand today for cloud computing expertise in India is helping organizations transition from on-premise based to cloud-based environments. So it's that really sort of that helping their businesses do that migration, which is going to be crucial for their productivity and growth, is the single biggest thing. So maybe a key takeaway for some of our watchers and listeners here today to think about, how do they support those kind of skills in the workplace. So that was the snapshot of today. Now I just want to talk very briefly about tomorrow. And when I say tomorrow, I'm talking about 2025 and so what the next 5 years look like. And the reason we picked 2025 for this research is that by 2030, there's a huge amount of uncertainties and we really can't tell with any degree of robustness about what exactly the digital skills landscape will look like. But 5 years, we can say with a lot greater confidence of what that evolution could look like, but still time for significant change. So if you look across the 6 APAC countries, we looked at how many new digital skills training will be needed over the next 5 years. And the number is staggering. We see that by 2025, across these countries, we will have 819 million workers that will be using digital skills. And each one of those workers will have to learn 7 new digital skills, which results in the 5.7 billion trainings. Now, when people see this, that the first thing that normally leaps out to them is like, wow, 7 skills? That's a huge number for each person to use. And how am I going to get that? And I guess the thing to stress here is number one, it's a different type of skills than we're used to in the past. So in the past, we often think about a 3 or 4 year university degree to acquire a skill. That's not how the digital skills landscape is evolving now. It's going to be a lot more sort of modular trainings that can be done alongside work, alongside training that's going to be used to get this digital skills uplift. And I think Rahul's going to share a few examples of AWS and what they're doing in this space. So it'll be a different type of learning. But the other thing, it'll be a very big mental shift. If you look today, and this is not just India, but if we look across countries, roughly 80% of our learning takes place before the age of 21, which is kind of crazy given the life expectancies that we have and the extended time we have in the workforce. Going forward, that's going to have to flip eventually to 80% of our learning taking place after that age. And so it's going to be not only different types of training, but a very different mindset of workers, but also employers about how do we support that massive shift we're talking about. If we go to the next slide, I want to talk about 2 areas that are going to be particularly important. The first is around advanced cloud skills. And these are really about things such as designing cloud-based architecture, which is going to be so crucial for many businesses going forward. And the second area is around advanced data skills. And this is really around the ability to manage large-scale data sets, so big data, and then be able to draw and synthesize insights out of that data. So these are 2 of the areas, if you're looking at things to acquire skills in, these would be 2 really important areas to think about how to build your skill set. Going to the next slide, we're looking at a few sectors outside the ICT is sort of instructive to understand what's happening there. If you look at manufacturing, what we see is that the cloud architecture design and the ability to design original content, such as software and web applications, is going to become particularly important. And I think COVID has actually just reinforced the importance of that. You've seen a lot of businesses realize that to shift to an online model. And businesses are not set up with the basics, if you like, sort of web applications and software to support that transition. So that's going to be really important across different sizes of businesses. The second sector to talk about is education. And for a similar reason as manufacturing, this COVID shift has seen a massive push to online education. And so if you like, it just reinforced and sped up a trend that was already happening pre-COVID. And that obviously comes with the ability and need to think about online instruction, but it also requires a set of new skills that many teachers have not thought about so far. And that's things like cybersecurity, for example. It's going to be really crucial with all that sensitive information that's going to be now done online. So just two sort of sectors to think about. And then just wanted to finish off by talking about the workers. So I mentioned that part of our research tries to add granularity in types of the skills that's needed. The other thing we do in this research is look at which type of workers are going to need those skills. And we have a distinction between 4 categories of workers. The first is those that are currently digitally skilled, but need to upskill in line with the changing demands of their jobs. The second group is those that are currently not using digital skills, but will need to do in the future. The third group is around future workers, so entering the workforce, and they'll have to keep pace with the changing skills landscape. And the last group is around people that are not in the workforce, either unemployed or sort of stay at home, if you like, mothers and fathers, that are also a significant group. Now, if you look at the digital skill requirements of those categories, the largest group is actually the people in the workforce that are currently not using digital skills. So that's second category. After that, it's the ones that are unemployed individuals or the ones not in the workforce. And then after that is the current digital skill workers. So India, if you like, has a slightly different challenge than some countries. For some countries which have a higher share workforce using digital skills today, it's really that first category that's important. It still is in India, but it's really, how do we get traction, particularly on the second and fourth categories of types of workers, which will be a really key part of the challenge. And I think what this research shows is that we're not talking about a digital skills evolution here. It really is a revolution in terms of the pace and the scale that we need to support this shift. But if we get it right, the benefits are huge. So with that, thanks for your time, and I'll pass back to Rahul to talk a little bit more about what AWS is doing here.
Thanks, Dr. Fraser. So let me just quickly take a recap of what AWS has been doing in India. I think we are committed to helping build the national skilling infrastructure. So we've been working across our education institutions, across our policymakers, our education technology firms and startups and education institutions. Just to give you a quick perspective of higher education, we have multiple education programs. And we have tens of thousands of students currently enrolled in these education programs, where students get access to learning paths, they get access to content, and they actually get access to our technology and services as well, along with credits to be able to experience that technology. I think that's a key element that I want to highlight here, that it's really important to be able to experience this new technology by working on it. And programs such as AWS Educate really help students get a feel for the technology and build on top. And the same technology that is available to the largest AWS customers is made available to these students as well. So when you think about reinforced learning as an example, today, a student in IIT Varanasi, as an example, can work on reinforced learning models as well. To be able to integrate better this new technology curriculum, we've also worked with multiple education institutions. So 7 higher education institutions we had announced last year: Chitkara University, Galgotia University, Manav Rachna, and others, where we've integrated our cloud curriculum into the overall curriculum of these institutions. And the key again is that they are able to, using AWS, really experience this technology, and they're able to actually make sure that they are far more relevant on the skill side as they come out of higher education and graduation. If we move to the next slide, we've also been working with across our reskilling and skilling learners. When you think about Future of Skills is fairly ambitious and great initiative of the Government of India and NASSCOM, where they've really focused on the deep technology skills. Future of Skills Prime, we've been working very closely with Future of Skills Prime as well, again focused on deep skills to be made available to learners. One of the things that when you think about, I talked about very briefly at the start of this webinar about the breadth of skills that are needed. So when you think about digital literacy at one end, I'd like to give you an example to make it real. We've been working with the Common Service Centers. India, under the Ministry of IT, has more than 450,000 common service centers, and they have a digital literacy mission under PMG Disha, which is a fairly ambitious program to provide 60 million people in India with digital literacy skills. And we've been, as AWS, helping them achieve that mission. Very recently, I mean, that's one end of the spectrum, but very recently, when you think about the other end of the spectrum and the deep technology skills that are needed, I'd like to remind folks, and you may have heard about last month, we announced the Quantum Applications Lab with the Ministry of IT in India. And that was the first lab, AWS lab in the world, where the focus is going to be on creating quantum applications. And skilling is a big part of that. So how can we actually bring quantum skills to our research institutes, to our startups, and really create that environment of, again, experiencing quantum and building on quantum so that India can become a quantum superpower in the next 5 to 10 years. I think the ability for us to work at a digital literacy level, as well as something as deep as quantum, I think that's the opportunity that we have in front of us. Also, when you think about training and certification, you can actually take your learning to the next level by, not just through these on-demand free courses, but you can actually gain certifications through our training and certification offering. Fundamentals of cloud computing is something that I've been certified in as well. It's amazing to see how quickly these skills are changing, and therefore how important it is for you to keep track and keep current on these skills. So let me just bring it home very quickly on the last slide, which is, when you think about digital skills in use today, there is, from an India perspective, there are a number of workers that are actually using a large number of these skills at one end of the spectrum. But at another end of the spectrum, there is a big opportunity that we have to be able to skill our digital workers as well. So I think it in our mind, it still talks about that concept of a digital divide, which I look at as an opportunity in front of us when it comes to India. And then when you project this out the next 5 years, 4 to 5 years, the need for ensuring that we have a consistent mechanism to be able to work across our institutions, across our policymakers and government stakeholders. I think this report can really form the basis of not just the the technological elements, which are the vertical competencies that Dr. Fraser talked about, but those horizontal competencies that are needed, which are very much in demand today by our job seekers when it comes to communication ability, design thinking, and so on and so forth. So I think this report therefore gives a very good context to how we should progress on the skills journey in India going forward. Thank you so much. I'll hand it back to you, Sujit.
Thank you so much, Rahul, Dr. Fraser. Yeah, can you knock that presentation? Can you take that off? Yeah, thanks, Narita. Yeah. So, Shilpa, let me just ask the first question here. The 5 in-demand skills that you expect will see the highest growth in the next 5 years by 2025. Some of them are self-explanatory. I have some doubts with cloud architecture design, for instance. Is that one cloud skill amongst a lot of other cloud skills? Is that what you mentioned when you said it is primarily about helping companies migrate from on-premise to cloud, or are there other skills also involved?
I can start with it and then hand over to Dr. Fraser. I think if I take that at a very high level context, I think the mindset of solutioning and building on cloud is very different from the older paradigms where you're when you create applications, and specifically in context of new technology. When you think about 5 years ago, 6 years, even 10 years ago, when you wanted to build a software application, you could spend 6 months writing the requirements and therefore, and then go through the cycles of testing and so on and so forth and deploy in 2 years. The way new technology, the way that it's really changing the paradigm, you have to experience new technology in a very different way. Whether it be machine learning, whether it be IoT, whether it be any new technology that you're talking about. I think that's where cloud comes, and your skills in cloud become really, really important, because you need to be able to experience those skills to be able to work on them. So sometimes you may not even know what the requirements are at the end of, to start off with. And you may only think about an outcome in mind and work backwards from there. And I think that's to a very high level what it means when you say cloud architecture, the ability for you to think about how this would work on the cloud, which is a completely different paradigm. The other point I want to make is, and to the broader audience here, a lot of time we think of cloud as just virtualization, which means that I'm taking something that I've developed today, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I'm just going to retrofit it and move it to the cloud. That's not what true cloud is about. It's really about creating at scale applications that can work, and scale to hundreds of millions of users on if the need be, and so on and so forth. So the way that you think about architecting on cloud is very, very different, and that's what we're trying to highlight. But I'll defer to Dr. Fraser if he wants to add anything more on depth on this.
Yeah, look, I think Rahul gave a great summary there, and it's really, if you look about cloud skills, there is a range. And at the most basic level, it's using cloud-based software as a service, applications and tools. So this, for example, could be a small business owner making use of a cloud-based service to record and track the number of customer transactions for accounting purposes. But increasingly, as cloud becomes so ubiquitous, the business applications become much more advanced and much more high value. And so then we need a different type of a set of skills. And so the skills there we're talking about are really around designing and refining these cloud architectures. And that could allow rethinking IT applications to allow them to be serverless. And even though that may seem like a very advanced stage, I think we're going to be surprised at how quickly this evolves and how quickly it becomes so important for workers to have this kind of skill.
Okay. The second highest growth we expect to see is in something called software operations support. Can you explain that?
Should I jump in on this one, Rahul?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So, yeah, the software operations, again, there's a range of different skills that they could use around software operations. And if you think about the kind of most it's around using basic digital software. So it could be around a plumber making use of a smartphone apps for home service repairs so they can connect with more customers or improve their customer experience. But increasingly where the growth is happening is around going beyond that and thinking about how to support that software operations across a company. So you can make use of it at lots of different levels, not just at the most basic level of the consumer, just improving the way that you interact with them, but actually thinking about how you redesign your systems end to end. And what research shows is that small and medium enterprises are some of the biggest beneficiaries of this, and particularly as it helps them expand to export markets, being able to use these software operations and support across the business becomes a really important enabler for their growth.
Okay. Shilpa?
Yeah, Dr. Fraser, you spoke about how you need to marry vertical competency and horizontal competency. Can you talk about some of the early proof points of how this is shaping up in companies?
Yeah, it's really interesting is that, when this journey that we've gone on with digital skills, it's happening so rapidly with the technology development that the skills landscape is really trying to catch up to the speed of growth. And where a lot of the paradigm started was that they tried to teach students or workers one particular skill. And so that could be around how to think about sort of software development. But then suddenly the technology moved again and there was a constantly playing catch up. And then there was a realization as well that that's necessary but not sufficient. You need some of those cross-cutting horizontal skills to also be effective. So it really is that combination. I think sort of education institutions have gone through a bit of a learning experience of this, is that some just focus on the verticals, some just focused on the horizontals, but it's that combination that's really important. And the challenge for an education institution is basically how do you, particularly for the vertical skills, keep pace with that rapid speed of change. And it's interesting, like on, for example, Rahul mentioned that what NASSCOM's doing with this skills initiative, the 155 skills, which is terrific. One of the challenges is how to keep refreshing that and updating that content. In Singapore, for example, that content gets updated every 18 months to keep pace with these changes. So that speed of change is going to be really important. How do we design that in to all the training programs that we have?
I can also add a little bit to that. I think, Shilpa, when you look at the big skill gap that exists in India, when you think in context of students applying for jobs in higher education institutions, I think still the ability for a job seeker to be able to evaluate a student on the deep tech skills versus the communications ability, that's still, the trade-off between both. I think there's still a lot of more work to be done on that. So people typically will look at the softer side, the softer skills. Let's go and search for analytical skills and retrain people or students to more specific technologies for 6 months. And that's a lot of time that needs to be reinvested in getting new skills. One of the really interesting things about this report is we finally have a framework that brings together these two, and the need to apply this, the kind of intervention that is needed at the intersection of these horizontal capabilities and vertical competencies. I think that's the exciting part for me, really. We finally have something that will help us sort of navigate that path. And one of the biggest areas of impact that I see would be in higher education institutions, where we can look at more specificity in that area.
My colleague at the back end, mentioned that as soon as Rahul started speaking, first questions started coming in from the audience. So exactly the kind of subject the audience are interested in. I don't want to disappoint them. So let me ask one of them, Surya Padala, asking this question. Would web development technologies be of any value in the future? If not, what is the alternative for web developers? In fact, your third highest growth till 2025 is in some web development was part of that, wasn't it?
Dr. Fraser, you want to take that?
Yeah, happy to. So look, here's the good news is, yes, web development, if you've already got skills there, it'll be increasingly important. And even at the very basic level, we talked about one of the impacts of COVID is that we need to have this huge migration from the businesses that kind of basically just have offline models to increasingly online models. So things like that, web development and software development are going to be a crucial part of that. But the interesting thing is that, again, that's an area that is advancing very quickly. So I think we'll see the growth in the basic digital skills in that area, but increasingly we're seeing about the ways we can push so that the websites, the web development, to make them much more interactive, much more linked to the core operations of businesses. So it's not, if you like, just a standalone front of house that is disconnected from everything behind, but actually becomes really quite integrated into the overall operations of the business. And that's where I think we're going to see the really interesting evolution of that skill base.
What kind of skills do you have to learn for something like that to make it more interactive and all that?
Well, I think this is where it comes back to that combination of the horizontal versus the vertical. But so to get that kind of integration with the operations, we need to start thinking about some of those things like the project management, the digital problem solving, but even things like the cybersecurity standpoints, right? So we see increasingly that a lot of websites and interfaces are built, and a lot of sensitive information is out there, but without the right kind of protocols and protections to support that. So it's going to be that, again, one of these, a really good example actually of that combination of the vertical and the horizontal, which is going to be really important to achieve the impact that we hope in this area.
And I can very briefly add to that as well. I think we at AWS say that cloud is increasingly about, and AWS is increasingly about taking care of the undifferentiated heavy lifting that that typically you need to do with technology. So cloud takes that away to a large extent. And when it comes to web development, I think it's not any different, because I think because of the availability of a number of providers that can give you the basic requirements of when you have to move things to the web, the focus really would be on aesthetics, design aesthetics. It'll be on user interface, and I think that's a big jump that needs to happen. As Dr. Fraser said, not on the security aspects and how you integrate. Again, cloud becomes important because how do you create for scalability? Just as an example, so you need to be able to understand, how do you really create a scalable sort of web design on the back end with the right APIs and so on and so forth. So I think that's where the way that you think about this is going to be very different. Two, I think the way cloud will help is today you can log on and you can actually get access to the AWS console and start building immediately from scratch. And within a few minutes or within a couple of hours, you can have a fully fledged website working that is truly scalable to the biggest demand. So I think that's the power of cloud. So the ability for you to be able to have experienced that becomes really, really important.
We have many questions pouring in. This one is from Bhanu Pratap Reddy. I'm working in mechanical R&D, but planning to change my career to cloud computing. Would that entail a complete switch, or would I be better off trying to employ cloud skills into my existing role? I'm someone with current zero knowledge on computer science.
I can give a perspective and then also defer to Dr. Fraser. I think the way I see it is, as I said, cloud is going to be across the board, and we're truly going to move to a multidisciplinary environment where when you think about the skills that you need to learn, I think technology is going to become, and cloud is going to become, a pervasive skill that everybody needs to learn and be comfortable with. But when you think about even from mechanical engineering, let's say fluid dynamics, how do you create the latest models on fluid dynamics? How do you experience them? You can do that on the cloud, and you don't have to wait for your computing infrastructure to come in. You can just use AWS, and there are pre-existing models that you can apply and learn from there. I think that's the key. So given the future is going to be multidisciplinary, given the future is going to be about more and more micro skills, I think that's the mindset. There needs to be a base, obviously, a base in your discipline and a base of technology, which most likely is cloud. And then on building on that, on micro skills based on what your interests are and your future is about. I don't know, Dr. Fraser, if you want to add something there.
Look, I thought Rahul gave a great summary of that. And I think the only thing I'd add is that there's an interesting insights that in India that there is this gap between what training institutions are producing and what employers want in this area. And I think that'll be really important for anyone looking at this area about new skills they acquire. It's not only the type of skill, but where you obtain it. And in this research, they showed that 90% of the students coming out of the 3,500 engineering schools in India were considered to have inadequate programming skills for software engineering by their employers. So that's quite a huge gap. Unfortunately, India is not alone in that. You see quite consistent survey results across many countries. So it sort of speaks to this sort of the needs of industry changing quicker and in different ways than what training institutes are providing. So I think one thing from a student or a worker standpoint is if you're looking at a training course, really look to what degree industry is involved in this and it's been designed with industry is going to be a really important choice factor.
And just to add the last point, I think I was just remembering one of the interns that we hired from one of the colleges was actually a biomedical engineering student, because there you go, because you need that intersection as well. So that's I just wanted to bring that to life as well with that example.
Okay. I just wanted a clarification also on this large-scale data modeling that you had amongst the top 5 in-demand skills. I mean, what specific skills do you require for that?
Professor?
Sure. So this is, if you look at sort of the data modeling, again, there's kind of a spectrum. And so you have at the very basic level, using very basic data analyst tools. And I'll go back to my sort of favorite example of the plumber, just to visualize it. But if you think about a plumber, this could involve a plumber interpreting data on water consumption from smart meters. So just a really basic interpretation. And then you get to really up to the spectrum to the more advanced skills. And these are around creating large-scale data models and be able to synthesize the insights from them. And I think this is one of the really evolving areas, is that the challenge that we're seeing is that it's not just about the technology and the coding. It's about being able to synthesize that and what we say, come up with the so what that becomes really important. And you see this in kind of, if you look at salary packages for workers, the ones who can just do coding is actually becoming commoditized very, very quickly. The workers that can combine that skill with the kind of digital problem solving, that kind of horizontal skill, to sort of synthesize and draw the insights out of that, that's incredibly valuable. And we're not talking about just a small increase in salary, we're talking about multiples increase, because it's such a much more valuable skill for workers. So again, I'd say for anyone listening here that's looking around sort of doing the data modeling and big data, don't just think about the coding aspect of this, but think about how do you train yourself on the problem solving and the synthesis of what comes out of that to draw really practical insights. And that will really set you apart.
Okay. Shilpa?
Question is coming from Jaiveer Singh. I'm a cybersecurity major, but I hope to take up artificial intelligence considering the current industry landscape. What is your advice?
So there's a ton of work happening in machine learning and cybersecurity. There's a big intersection that's already happening when you look at services like Macy on AWS, which actually is a machine learning setup that is protecting our entire infrastructure, and proactive threat monitoring. I think there's a good intersection that at least I see and that's where I'm again coming back to that whole point would be that intersection of multiple capabilities for a specialization. So when you think about cybersecurity and machine learning, it's a great area of work, given all that's happening in trying to build better, threat avoidance mechanisms and solutions. So my suggestion would be create a base, work on micro skills, and today technology exists. When you think about Amazon SageMaker, you don't even need to know coding to be able to do machine learning. With very basic sort of knowledge on coding, you can actually work on machine learning. So no longer do you have to worry about, do I need to have studied computer science for 4 years to be able to do machine learning? No, it's not a need anymore. And that's when I come back and reiterate that the undifferentiated heavy lifting of technology, AWS has taken care of, so that you can, as a learner, can really focus on the outcome and just work on that.
You can do it without any coding experience, or you need to know some coding?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that you don't need to know any coding. You need to be able to write structurally and think logically. That's it.
Okay.
And I used to be an assembly language programmer at one point in time in my life, which is all about writing just numbers. So there you go.
Okay. Okay. Like Shilpa said, lots of questions. We don't want to disappoint them. So yeah, I mean, you answered this partly, but if you have anything more to add, this is from Vijay Karthik asking, what are the key skills that BPM/IT services professionals should learn around cloud computing to be future ready and get into cloud-based roles?
Dr. Fraser, you want to take that? Or
I'll hand up to you, Rahul. You're the the go-to.
No, so again, I think when you think about the way cloud is impacting business operations, more and more, I think again, it's all about coming back to the same term. The undifferentiated heavy lifting is going away. No longer do you need skills that are manual and repetitive in nature, because those are being taken care of. You need to move towards more higher, skills and application of those skills. And that's no different when it comes to the application of cloud. So, today you can set up an automated call center, as an example, in a matter of days on AWS using our services. And, there are so many solutions that are available today that can help you, automatically manage, monitor, and track the operations. I think that's where the need to really think about how you communicate with, and how you sort of gain insight from all the data that's coming, how you communicate with your stakeholders. Those horizontal skills become far more and more important to the ability for you to really work on multiple diverse systems, and the ability to really bring all of that together, the resilience or the adaptability that is needed. I think that only comes through experience. I think that's where if you can go and experience the very different kind of technologies, it just prepares you far better when the change comes and the accelerated change comes. You're just intrinsically more resilient and adaptable to that change, because you know so much and you dealt with it before in a time when it was not that complex and critical.
Relation, let me just take this because it's a related question for Rahul. What is from Rahul Nandan? Another Rahul. What is a fair time frame for a cloud novice to come to some basic level around AWS or other CSP hands-on for better job skills?
Well, as I said, you don't even need to know coding for machine learning on AWS using Amazon SageMaker. So there you go. If you spend, I've seen people do that in a matter of weeks. There is no time frame as such. I can't give you a generic time frame. Some of the our rock stars, our interns that we've hired, one of the interns that's working with us is one of our best solution architects on AWS in a matter of weeks, because they've learned so much. They have so much learning in the past, and they're able to apply that learning. So there is no time frame. I think it's all about, again, you can't be everything to everybody. So if you think that there is one broad sort of cloud guru that's sitting there, maybe there is, but there'll be only very few of them. So again, it's all about finding your level of specialization and the intersection of those horizontal and vertical capabilities. And there is no end to this learning. I think that's the other thing that I've learned. There is no such thing as being the world's best expert on anything, because the way things are changing and the way multiple different paradigms are coming together, there is no end to this, that you've walked the journey and you've reached the top of the mountain and now you can relax. So my suggestion again is that create the intermediate road, stakes in the ground, that in your own professional career or your learning journey, and work towards those outcomes. And those should be, I think, the way to approach this, because there's no end to this journey. I'll still reiterate one very important point. With programs such as AWS Educate, you can, if you're a student, whether you be in school or a college, you can gain access today to the world's technology that's being used by some of the world's largest companies, and apply those skills, learn and apply those skills. There's free content available. There's you can really log into the console. I've done that as well. I had a console account. I learned AWS myself, and I'm hands-on. If I can do this, I'm sure anybody else can. So that
you don't have to be a CS student or an engineering student to do all this.
No, not anymore. Not anymore.
Shilpa?
Yeah. We have this question from Prabhu Palanisamy. If you can share some details on the job opportunities in cybersecurity at the intersection of cybersecurity and data sciences.
Sure. Dr. Fraser, do you have a good anecdote?
Well, look, I'll just mention one, and then I'd love to hand back to Rahul. I'm sure he's got lots of thoughts there, but just to take a bit of pressure off Rahul, who's been doing a lot of this. So I think one thing I'd point out too is when we think about cybersecurity, the thing we sometimes skip over is the ethics part. But that's going to become increasingly important, right? As we develop these AI tools, as we develop these incredibly powerful machine learning techniques, the cybersecurity important, but also thinking about digital ethics, and you start to get into some really thorny issues that we haven't really come across before. And so that's it's a sort of a different amalgamation of skill sets than we typically see. So I'll just point to that factor that it's worth not taking our eye off that, because that's going to become increasingly important in the coming years. Rahul?
Sure. No, I think, again, going back to the same point that I was reiterating, I think that increasingly there's going to be an intersection of how you're consuming and using and analyzing data, using machine learning or quantum going forward in every sphere of and every use case. And cybersecurity is one of the biggest ones. When you think about quantum technologies and what's coming up ahead in quantum and cybersecurity coming together, it's a huge area of interest that people are working on. So it's all again about specialization. How do you get to that level of specialization? There are a number of tools available today. Again, if you want to learn about those tools, there are existing learning paths available for you to pick up and work on from there. But I see this intersection really come together as well. Again, it's all about, again, interest and learning from the ground up. So learn the technology, experience it online on AWS, and then you'll find exactly where your calling is.
Okay. This again, another question from Nitin Agarwal. He's thanking Techies for this webinar. Like I said, people love this kind of skilling and learning programs. He's asking about databases. How can DBA and DB architects fit into the cloud world? How critical is it to upskill on cloud-centric DB offerings like Aurora, Dynamo, DB, etc., versus traditional DB skills in Oracle, SQL Server, MySQL, etc.?
I think it's fair to say that the future is on cloud. There's a lot of movement that we're seeing on cloud, and again, we talked about this a little bit. The paradigm of working on cloud is different. It's more about, again, architecting for scale. It's not about some of the undifferentiated heavy lifting on databases is taken away by our managed services, as an example. And therefore, it really frees up. And the skills that are then needed is, how do you architect for scale? How do you really architect a database for scale? So when you think about DynamoDB, it's a NoSQL database that can scale to to a phenomenal length to be able to provide very, very seamless sort of outcomes for those use cases. The focus will be again on architecting. The focus will be, how do I create the right structures on the back end? How do you merge between the application and the database in the right form and fashion so that it truly is, you can create something that is scalable at a fraction of the cost? I think that's the key thing to the customer. What does your customer need at the end of the day? You work backwards from there. You want scalability, you want performance, and you want to be able to do that at a fraction of a cost without having to go through any sort of a lock-in. So when you think about the AWS database offerings, I think the skills needed there are going to be around all of those components. And you can obviously see that those skills are, it's not just about maintenance, because that, is taken care of. It's really continuously architecting for better outcomes and lower cost for our customers.
Okay.
Yeah. We have another question. This is from Raki Sharma. How will digital marketing skills evolve? Will an MBA no longer matter for marketeers? Will it be all about digital marketing tools?
Sure. I mean, I can take that, and just let me know, Dr. Fraser, if you have anything to add on this. Again, it's a perspective. Nothing is redundant. I don't think anything is redundant, because everything will change and everything is changing to adapt. Digital marketing is an important perspective to engaging with your customers, and you've seen whatever has been happening with the progression of with the pandemic, that the progression of digital innovation is multifold now, and therefore the ability for your sort of communication channels to engage and scale at that level up and down is going to be a very, very important concept. The way you engage with your customers is changing. I don't want to dilute the concept of an MBA, and I think it's a little beyond me because I'm not an expert on an MBA, but I can tell you about, except having gone through one myself, I can tell you that from a technology perspective, the ability to have those skills, those micro skills, are going to be really, really important, no matter whether you're a digital marketer or not. How do you actually create the right combination of engagement channels using multiple tools at your disposal? How can you think about architecting that engagement channel in a very different way? You can learn those concepts in an MBA and still use technology to apply it. I think it's really about thinking outside the box. I mean, that's what the world is moving to, using technology. You cannot now anymore, just look at one outcome and say, okay, I'm going to work on that one outcome through a requirement study and so on and so forth. It's all about taking the power of technology and putting it into more experimental small use cases and then scaling from there. That ability and skill is going to be very, very important. And that's what CEOs and CTOs and CIOs are looking for in individuals as well. Can you really take a concept, think about it outside the box, and apply it in small sort of bite-sized chunks and build something large? When you think about AWS, that's how AWS works. So that's how AWS was born. Our first service was the simple storage service. We launched that in 2006. It was just one service. Then we added the EC2, which is compute. So we built it in small Lego bricks, if you may call it. And I think that's the whole important thing here as well. If you're a digital marketer, if you're interested in digital marketing, how do you create that plethora of those smaller blocks that you can put together on the fly much more flexibly? Because tomorrow there may be a very different need that comes through.
Dr. Fraser, I wanted to ask you you said India has a very high proportion of advanced skills. I mean, does India stand to gain from that? Is there any way we can use that skills for a broader cause to our advantage in some sense?
Yes, look, I think that's a really good news story here, and I see them both in positives, right? I see, even though the low share today of workers is a huge upskilling potential, and because of the availability of these digital courses, you could do that a lot quicker than we could in the past. So I think that's a positive. the fact that there's so many workers with advanced digital skills today is also terrific, and I think puts India in a great position. I think one of the interesting, and there's lots of areas that could be a benefit. You know, when we think about digital trade, so we don't talk about, for example, digital trade because it's not measured in economic sectors. But it's actually, if you measured it, there was some research that AlphaBeta did a few years ago, which showed that it would be one of the top export sectors for the Indian economy, and includes everything from e-commerce to app development and BPO, etc. So one, there's a huge export sector there that's potentially available. The second thing, and this is I think the big thing, not just for India, but across economies, is we talk about this kind of terminology of, they say, secular stagnation, which is an economist's way of saying the good times are over. We're not going to have the same growth in productivity that we have in the past. It won't drive economies as fast. But I don't subscribe to that. I think that the challenge is that we just haven't applied technologies as widespread as we could. And so I think what's really interesting for India is, can we use those advanced digital skills, broaden them so they go beyond the ICT sector, going into more traditional sectors? And then I think there's a really exciting economic development story. And I think India is actually better placed than any economy around the world to actually do that because of that penetration of advanced digital skills.
Okay. One last question from my side, Dr. Fraser. You mentioned the top 5 in-demand skills, fastest growing by 2025. Are there anything else beyond that which you think could suddenly burst out and become faster growing, or which are some of the other ones that are becoming prominent?
Look, there's always things will pop up and surprise us. So we'll be aiming to sort of regularly update this to see, what things are trending. So look, I've learned not to do too many predictions. I remember sort of an economic forecast before COVID, and I'm glad that hasn't been published anywhere. So you never know what exactly is going to happen. I guess what I would say is, and just to reiterate a key point we made, is around the pace of change. And there's a good anecdote of, there's a rower, Matthew Pinson, who's a British rower who won 4 Olympic gold medals, so 4 separate Olympic Games. And each time he won an Olympic gold medal, his coach the next week would give him a piece of paper. And that had the time that they had to achieve for the next Olympic Games to win a gold medal. And the time was incredibly faster than each time, right? So, and I feel there's a little bit like this, is that you'll get a digital skill, and then someone will give you the piece of paper, and that that we go, wow, I've got to climb another mountain. That's the world we're going to be in. But I think it's an exciting world to be in as well.
Absolutely, no, very exciting world. We are out of time. Thank you so much. I think there are some of audience members also thanking both of you for the kind of answers that you provided. So thanks a lot, Dr. Fraser. Thanks a lot, Rahul. Very exciting discussion. Exactly that, like I said, the kind of things our audiences love. Everybody's trying to actually adjust to this new world, and digital skills are becoming so important. So thanks again. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Rahul.